Imagine the world before dinosaurs ever set a claw on Earth. The continents fuse into a supercontinent shaped like a cracked shield, deserts so wide the horizon looks like a mirage, salt pans that glitter like ice under a furnace sun, and river systems that knit the interiors together with rare green seams. The air is thin with oxygen compared to what you breathe now, and summers drive temperatures to extremes, while winters can flip the script to killing cold. Plants hold the ground with low forests of seed ferns and conifers, and in the floodplains, strange tusked herbivores graze with barrel chests and sprawling limbs. In this world, tens of millions of years before the first sauropod ever stretched its neck, a hunter rules. Broad-headed, long-toothed, walking on limbs neither fully sprawled nor fully upright, it carries a high fin of bone struts along its spine like a row of sails stitched by skin. The name children often meet first is Dimetrodon, but that name is only the doorway. Beyond it waits an entire bestiary of nightmarish beasts older than dinosaurs, hunters, and rivals that invented many of the tools later carnivores would use. They were not reptiles. They were synapsids, part of the deep family tree that would eventually give rise to mammals. And they dominated the Permian world with an array of jaws and tactics honed by a harsh planet. Start with the skull, because the skull tells the truth of a predator's life. Dimetrodon's head is triangular when seen from above, a wedge that focuses force at the business end. The temporal opening behind the eye, the synapsid hallmark, allows for bulging jaw muscles to pass from the brain case to the lower jaw, and those muscles close long, laterally compressed teeth like scissors. The largest species in North America and Europe bore canines that would not look out of place in a saber-toothed cat, elongated and slightly curved, with fine serrations that bite more like a steak knife than a steak. This was not an animal designed to crush shells. It was a slicer. The lower jaw includes a long-toothed surface and a rear hinge braced by bones that keep the bite aligned under great stress. Computer models of bite mechanics built from scans of fossil skulls suggest Dimetrodon could deliver forces high enough to puncture thick hide and to lever chunks of meat from a struggling prey animal. Fossil bone beds of its possible prey, heavily built herbivores like Edaphosaurus, or amphibians in river margins, sometimes bear grooves and gouges that match the tooth spacing and profile of its serrations. The sail along its back stands like a question in every museum mount. Each sail is built from neural spines that rise from the vertebrae like flagpoles. In some species, the spines are circular in cross-section. In others, they are flattened and show ridges where blood vessels once ran. Skin and connective tissue stretch between them, turning a line of bone into a broad surface. What the sail was for has been argued for more than a century. One line of thinking sees a thermostat. In cool mornings, the animal could orient its fin to the sun and warm more quickly than rivals, and in the peak heat of noon it could turn and bleed heat away on a breeze. Another sees a billboard. Species and sex could advertise with colors and patterns on the sail, and courtship could involve display. A third sees a combination of both, or even a weapon of social rank. Evidence supports a role in thermoregulation because the spines show grooves consistent with a rich blood supply, and because some Permian environments swung from cold to hot in a single day. Evidence supports display because similar sails evolved independently in other synapsids and even in distantly related reptiles, a clue that selection often favors a big signal. Whatever the allocation of purpose, carrying a sail did not slow it so much that it lost its crown. If anything, getting to operating temperature sooner than the creatures around it would have turned mornings into hunting hours. The body plan is older than any cat or crocodile, you know, but it is not clumsy. Dimetrodon's limbs splayed more than a mammal's but tucked under the body more than a lizard's, a compromise stance that allowed bursts of speed and the ability to pivot without rolling onto its side. The tail is long and muscular, a counterweight in turns. Trackways from the Permian show belly drags and tail marks for some animals, but Dimetrodon footprints often show raised body carriage, deep impressions of the feet, and a stride length that speaks of competent ground travel. It was not a sprinter like a cheetah, but neither was it a plotter. Think of a low, powerful gait that could follow a scent along a riverbank, and then pounce with enough acceleration to seize a target at the water's edge. Its world gave it plenty to eat and many ways to die. The Permian did not promise a gentle life. Seasonal aridity turned ponds into traps. When rains returned, floods bit off whole meanders and scoured nests from banks. Volcanic episodes dusted skies and altered temperatures. Oxygen levels sometimes dipped low enough that waters went breathless, and animals that lived by the margins learned to plan their days around chemistry. In this roulette, Dimetrodon's senses and teeth made it both a killer and a scavenger. It could steal carrion from giant amphibians and wrest it from the jaws of smaller synapsids. Healed bite marks on some skulls suggest intraspecific fighting over carcasses or territories. A particularly evocative fossil shows bones of multiple Dimetrodon individuals tangled in a dried pond deposit with fish and amphibian remains. As if the pool shrank, everything crowded, and the resulting catastrophe buried the losers together. It is easy to paint a single apex and forget that time hosts a relay. As the Permian rolled on, new synapsid hunters took the baton. In South Africa and Russia, gorgonopsians evolved sleek, long-legged predators with saber canines proportionally larger than Dimetrodons and with skulls optimized for slashing. Their eyes faced more forward. Their posture edged closer to the upright. Their bodies traded the sail for speed. An animal like Inostransphaea, a gorgonopsian from Russia the size of a lion, probably could sprint faster and strike deeper. Fossil bones show canines that penetrated between ribs and left convincing evidence of killing bites. They hunted the emerging herds of therapsid herbivores, including the beaked, burly dicynodonts that anchored food webs across Pangaea. If Dimetrodon looks like a nightmarish crocodile-wolf hybrid, a gorgonopsian looks like an even leaner nightmare with sabers designed for a throat. Behind and beside them evolved a different style of terror, the therocephalians and the early acynodonts, smaller but quick and smart, with skulls trending toward the mammalian. Their eye sockets enlarged, their snouts shortened, their jaw joints began to shift toward the pattern that would later populate the mammal skull. Some show evidence of whisker pits or attachment points for facial nerves, suggestive of tactile exploration. They would inherit the Earth after the worst crisis life had faced, and their descendants would include true mammals. But in the late Permian, the animal that could turn an herbivore's courage to fear in an instant was still a saber-mouthed hunter, not a furtive insect eater. The environment was primed for extremes. The supercontinent Pangaea created vast interiors far from maritime moderation. Monsoons pounded coasts, deserts baked interiors, the tropics swung between deluge and drought. Plants turned the landscape green in ribbons and islands, and between them, red beds of oxidized sediment baked under Sunday. In this harshness, animals found water and shade the way modern creatures find currency. Thus, the open ground was a killing ground. A herd of dicynodonts pushed along a river corridor could be ambushed where the bank pinched. A labyrinthodont amphibian could be trapped in a remnant pool. The nightmarish beast you imagine older than dinosaurs did not only rush, it planned. Scent ruled its world. Grooves in the nasal region of skulls suggest complex turbinates that could have moistened and warmed air, aiding smell. Some researchers have proposed that early synapsids had higher metabolic rates than reptiles around them, perhaps not at mammalian levels, but high enough to confer stamina in cool mornings and long chases. If so, then timing a hunt to the hour when competitors were sluggish would multiply advantage. Even its sail may have played a role in dominance beyond heat. A display organ is a social tool. In a world before birds, here was a creature that could turn its back into a signboard. Imagine a morning when mists still lie low and two individuals meet on a bar. Heads turn side on to measure skulls. Bodies can't to present sail surface. The one with the taller, brighter, unscarred fin might win the argument without a bite. The loser slinks away and lives to try another territory. Selection for sail size and showiness could run hard in such a world, only constrained by the cost of carrying the structure and exposing it to attackers. Predators live at the edge of calculation where calories must equal or exceed costs over seasons, and any structure that did not pay for itself vanished. The persistence of sails across multiple species hints that they paid. Still, no apex lasts forever. The end of the Permian is the pivot on which this story turns from terror to awe. Somewhere far away, in what is now Siberia, tectonic wounds opened and flood basalts poured out for hundreds of thousands of years, flooding and reflooding a region the size of continents with lava. The atmosphere filled with carbon dioxide. Then with the chemistry that follows warming altered rainfall, acidified rain, and eventually oxygen-poor seas as stagnation stole breath from the depths. On land, heat shriveled forests. The old networks of rivers shifted. Food webs that had taken tens of millions of years to stabilize unraveled. The Great Dying, the Permian Triassic mass extinction, took more than 90% of marine species and a majority of land species. It was not an event like a thrown switch. It was a long shudder during which thresholds were crossed and ecosystems failed and tried and failed again. At the apex of that slide, the nightmarish beasts older than dinosaurs did not stand outside the weather. Gorgonopsians vanished. Dimetrodon and its kin had already ceded the stage in some regions to newer hunters, but the entire guild of large terrestrial predators collapsed. In the Triassic dawn that followed, something unexpected occupied the top for a while. Giant crocodile, lion archosaurs, and agile, lightly built predators that were neither dinosaur nor mammal. Only later did dinosaurs grow into the size and numbers that made them the emblem of dominance. Between the fall of the Permian hunters and the rise of the Jurassic tyrants lies a ragged interval of experiments, a relay of forms built for running in heat and hunting in change. Every shadow you imagine stalking a Triassic floodplain owes its empty niche to a Permian ancestor's failure to cross the fire years. Yet not every line died. The nightmarish beasts left whispers in our bones. The synapsid skull plan persists in mammals, with our single temporal opening and our reorganized jaw. Our middle ear bones are repurposed jaw bones from ancestors that learned to chew softly and hear sharply. The metabolic choices that began as slight advantages on cold mornings became, in our lineage, the drumbeat of warm-blooded life. Even the habit of building display structures, the willingness of selection to spend energy on signaling sings in horns, manes, plumage, and song. Dimetrodon's sail may be an early banner in a parade that runs through peacocks and antlers and human art. What kind of intelligence does a Permian hunter have? Not the kind that shapes stones or plans seasons, but the kind that maps a home range, remembers a waterhole, recognizes a rival's scent, and times an approach by wind. A brain cast from a skull can show relative sizes of olfactory bulbs, optic lobes, and cerebrum. For many of these predators, smell dominates, vision supports, and the forebrain is modest. That does not belittle them. It situates them. On continents where dusk can kill and distance is measured in thirst, the senses that keep one alive must stay tuned to the land itself. Imagine the feel of the ground under broad feet, temperature and texture telling the animal whether a river is near. Imagine the scent of dicynodont dung carried on a crosswind a day after a storm. Imagine the sightline down a dry arroyo where shade pools under a fallen conifer. In such a life, a nightmarish beast is simply an expert nature's solution to a problem of hard times. You can follow the evidence of their lives in the rocks if you know where to look. Red beds in Texas and Oklahoma hold skeletons in layers that speak of floodplains that swelled and dried. Karoo deposits in South Africa tell of communities that shifted as climate leaned toward harsh. Russian exposures preserve long chains of bones in fine-grained sediments where animals sought last water. In some places, coprolites smear the surface with a record of diet fish, scales, and bone shards peeking from stone, while in others, trackways curve and intersect like a script written by feet. Bones bear pathology, broken ribs that healed, tooth marks that scarred, jaws with abscesses. The most moving fossils are not always the biggest. A jaw of a young gorgonopsian with milk canines only partly erupted tells you of seasons and growth. A nest scrape near a swamp margin suggests behavior. Piece by piece, the picture is less nightmare and more biography. So why do they feel nightmarish to us? Partly because their features combine the familiar with the alien. A roomy mouth full of slicing teeth speaks to a mammalian fear. A sail or saber speaks to a reptilian dread. The mixture, living in a body built neither like a lizard nor like a dog, confuses the eye. Partly because their world is gone. We are not used to a planet that spends half a year withering and half a year drowning, where oxygen ebbs in lakes and breath is rationed. To imagine a hunter designed to thrive, there is to imagine an expert in a landscape that would kill us in a day. The nightmare, in other words, is a mirror held to our own fragility. There is another answer, more human. We like the dinosaurs because we meet them everywhere, their images welcoming us into museums and their names learned in childhood. The Permian titans do not appear as often in toys or films. Their unruliness of form has kept them in the footnotes for most people. So when we encounter a mount of a gorgonopsian or a painting of Dimetrodon stalking a drying pond, we feel what we feel when we walk into a room where the furniture has been moved. A jolt, a momentary sense that this, too, could have been the world's normal. The nightmarish beasts older than dinosaurs are not prequels. They are another story that almost kept running. If not for a different roll of geological dice, perhaps our textbooks would show the age of synapsid tyrants as the default, and dinosaurs as the strange interlude. When you place your hand on the railing before a Permian diorama, you are closer in kinship to the hunter than to any dinosaur it would one day be confused with. You share with it the deep architecture of a skull, the fate of having a single opening behind the eye for muscle to thread. Your ancestry passes through small, quick descendants of its cousins that survived the mass extinction by hiding and by eating anything. The nightmarish beast, older than dinosaurs, is not your ancestor in a straight line, but it is your relative in a way no tyrannosaur can claim. It is a reminder that the mammal plan flirted with dominance long before our time and lost, and that our later success is not guaranteed by fate but written by accidents survived and lessons learned. Picture it one last time in the light it knew best. The sun is low, the heat softened just enough for movement, wind rattles seed ferns, insects buzz at a pitch that tells of summer. Along a river's inside bend where the current slows, a heavy amphibian lifts a broad head for air. Mudfish scatter. At the edge of the willow-like shrubs, shadows merge into one, then separate as the hunter steps from shade. The sail catches the last light and glows along its edges. The head swings, sampling. The world is a library of invisible threads drawn on air, and one line reads fresh. The hunter lowers into that low, efficient lope that eats ground. In another minute there will be a rush, a splash, a thrashing minute, then a drag onto gravel where the first torn mouthful will steam. No one is there to watch except the lean cousins waiting to steal a scrap, and the insects that will clean what remains. No one names the beast or fears it on purpose. Night comes, stars turn, rivers widen and narrow, mountains lift and wear down. Millions of years from now, someone will hold its tooth in a hand and feel a tiny bite of awe. Older than dinosaurs, it bit a world that was harder than ours, and it held on until the world itself let go. If a story needs a moral, let it be this. Power arrives early in life's history and does not guarantee survival. Ingenuity appears, fades, and reappears in new bodies. What seems like a nightmare from a distance is simply a specialist doing hard work in a hard place. We live in the long shadow of those specialists, inheritors of tricks that began in skulls like theirs. We breathe thanks to survivors who learned to keep going when skies went wrong. When we speak about terror, we should also speak about continuity. In bone and blood, in the rules of teeth and the mathematics of heat and time, the nightmarish beast older than dinosaurs is part of us. It is the chapter that made the book thick enough for dinosaurs to arrive and for us to turn the page at all.